Hello, Horror Hounds. I hope you had a good festive season. And if you didn't, console yourself with the fact that it's over now. We can move on and we can look forward. In the run up to Christmas, I got into a weird habit of telling you all what I was drinking while I was reviewing that. So for those of you who are interested, I'm currently sipping on a rather delicious amaretto flavoured filter coffee that I got for Christmas. So cheers to you all, and this video specifically voted for by the Horror Appraisal, Frank the Vamp and War is Coming will be for George A. Romero's Martin, a frankly fantastic little vampire flick. Or is it? It is fantastic. Is it a vampire flick? That's what I meant. It's definitely a good film. The film Romero made right after Martin was Dawn of the Dead, and as we all know, Dawn of the Dead exploded. It changed everything. It changed Romero's career. It changed how he, as a filmmaker, is still regarded to this day. Even with Night of the Living Dead under his belt, it was, I think, the combination of Night and then Dawn that just took it to another level, that forever made the name George Romero synonymous with zombies. When you watch this after having seen Night of the Living Dead, you can see some of the thought process behind this. You see that he's ranging around looking for another horror staple, something from literature, something with Gothicism to it, that he can bring up to date and put in the real current world of America. He took the notion of the zombie in Night of the Living Dead, the Haitian voodoo mind-controlled slave, and really turned it into what if these undead creatures were real. And not only that, through that lens, I'm going to fire a really focused piece of social commentary, and I'm going to use all of this window dressing as a metaphor for something that I really want to say. And with Martin, he does exactly the same thing. He takes the vampire method and says, well, hang on, all right, literally, what if we take a vampire and plonk him in the middle of Pittsburgh? He is equally successful with what he does for vampires and what he did with the zombies. There's less opportunity for sequels with Martin, and between you and me, I don't think the title of the film did it any favours. Even if you haven't seen a film called Night of the Living Dead, you're going to remember the title, and the title tells you exactly what is going to be happening, and under the radar you can slip in your satire, your social commentary, your message, your metaphor. Call a film Martin, and that doesn't tell you anything. The setting is a vital ingredient to the success of this movie, and Romero and his team worked in and around Pittsburgh, but surely there's also there's surely a dark, subtle little joke going on there about taking the literary historical vampire from Transylvania and transposing him into modern day Pennsylvania. The choice of setting turns Martin into what's now sort of become a historical document of what Braddock was like at the time, this area of America in decline, no industry, no jobs, people moving away to look for work elsewhere, the church in decline. I mean, the church in this has literally been burnt down, and the congregation that's gathering are the older generation with the young moving away and not believing in the same things that their parents and grandparents' generation believed in. Shots of cars being crushed into cubes and things aren't accidental. This is industrial, mechanized turning of, the old industries into literal waste product. Is any of this ringing a bell? Does any of this sound familiar now at the start of 2017? Some of what's going on here in Martin from 1978 is as vital now as it was then. And I would even go so far as to suggest, with my very, very limited knowledge, that areas that we're hearing about recently in the news in America, like the Rust Belt and so on and so forth, some of the concerns being talked about in this movie have swung a presidential election. You know, the more things change, perhaps the more they really do say the same. And plonked within this is the character of Martin, who is either an 84-year-old vampire, as he thinks he is, and as his distant relation, cousin he calls him, is convinced he is a Nosferatu, you know, the shame of the family. This family line, who family legend has it, there are 3 vampires in the family. Or is he an incredibly mentally disturbed young man who has psychopathic urges, twisted and molded by a lifetime growing up within the toxic environment of this family shame, this family legend? Was he raised being told he was a vampire, has come to believe it? Or is that the truth of the matter, and the younger generation can't see it and see mental illness where the older generation see Nosferatu? And in the end, does it matter? And that's really where the sharp point of the wooden stake of the film is, right in the closing minutes of the movie. As we move through the film and sort of switch back and forth with the ebb and flow of the movie, as we're following this troubled young man or old vampire, it really made me feel like, and I'm not the first person to draw this connection, but this is the taxi driver of vampire movies. It's of a time and a place, and nominal hero, or at least protagonist, is a very disturbed person who can be one thing or another. In Taxi Driver, you know, is he a psychopath killer, or is he a vigilante hero? It's just kind of how circumstances fall around him that decide which hat society is going to put on him. And exactly the same with Martin. It's just what happens around him that is going to decide what hat gets put on him: vampire or, you know, mentally disturbed psychopath. There's no mistaking at all that Martin is a killer. The very opening scenes of the movie, which epitomize exploitation cinema, with him stalking and attacking, killing a woman on a train, on a night train, having congress with her. I don't know why I'm being so coy about that. He rapes her and then drinks her blood, but all done so starkly, in bright light, so realistically, that the exploitation credentials are right there. And then after that intense, brilliantly staged, brutal, harrowing scene, then Romero takes the film off the boil and simmers it along, and then punctuates it with moments of violence. And we're left to wonder and ponder all the way through, even beyond the end of the film, what we think we've actually seen occurring here. In between the grainy, ultra realistic documentary style present day stuff interspersed, there are black and white sections that you're asked to decide whether or not they're simply Martin's fantasy of how past events went down, or are they the memories of a vampire that has, although he looks young and in his early 20s, late teens, has actually been around for 84 years. And are they truly his memories, or are they just the fantasies of the sick mind of a sick young man? The answer is in the film. The very first killing on the train, before, as Martin's picking the lock of the cabin of the woman that he's identified as his next victim, before he opens the door, he imagines the scenario of him opening the door and her in her diaphanous sort of Hammer horror gothic literature gown, beckoning him towards her, as the commanding vampire in control. And as we know, when the door opens, what actually happens, it's the fantasy versus the reality. The gothic fiction of vampires versus the messy reality of this real world vampire, and the messy reality of having to kill someone. And going through that is not easy, and it's never easy throughout the film. But the very first black and white section we get is clearly presented to us as a fantasy inside Martin's mind. So I don't think it's unreasonable to argue that every other subsequent black and white segment is also a fantasy in Martin's mind. The film is bookended with two moments of explosive violence, right at the start and right at the end. The violence at the start and the moments of violence we see throughout the film, these are things that Martin wants and needs to do. It's what he gains his sustenance from, his pleasure from, his purpose from. The violence we see at the end of the film is what his relation, as named in the film, his cousin, although there's a huge age difference. That violence is what his cousin Papakurda has wanted to do for the entire length of the movie. If Martin is a vampire, then that urge, desire, that need to destroy him, you don't kill a vampire, you destroy it, you destroy the evil. That action of destroying a vampire is a heroic action to be lauded, and the urge to commit that act is also, therefore, to be praised. You're doing God's work, you're doing the right thing on the side of right. If Martin's a mentally ill young man, then what Papakurda does at the end, and the urges he's had throughout the film to do what he's done, are no different to the urges we've seen Martin have and enact throughout the film. Therefore, your fearless vampire hunter, your fearless vampire killer, your werewolf slayer, your zombie hunter, all of these people, if the vampires aren't real, if the zombies aren't real, and the werewolves aren't real, you then have to acknowledge that the label exists to make this person feel righteous and in the right, whereas the act at the end of the film is, if Martin's not a vampire, then Papakurda is exactly the same as Martin, just in exactly the same way. I'll underline this because I think Romero has underlined it himself in his films. At the very end of Night of the Living Dead, no, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be arguing that Night of the Living Dead is not a zombie movie. It is clearly a zombie movie. Zombies are in it. But at the very end, when all those good old boys come in and start clearing up, and all the imagery you get of the zombies being strung up, and the piles of bodies, and the bonfires, and the cracking the beers open and stuff like that, are by design meant to resonate with images, recent images we have seen in our own history, without any involvement of zombies. So right, he's taking two things and drawing a line between them, saying what you've been watching here happening with zombies, we've done ourselves, human on human. People have done to other people. And in order to do that, we've labelled this section less than human. In order for us to do monstrous things, we've taken a section of ourselves, labelled them less than human, monster, zombie, vampire, werewolf. so that we can do these things. It happened previously. It happens throughout history, and again here, in a very small way, at the end of Martin, in order to do something horrendous, the label of vampire of Nosferatu makes that act not only digestible, but somehow heroic. And I think the film just reveals that fallacy for what it is, and reveals that complete hypocrisy. Now, Martin ain't a hero. There's something wrong there, something horrendously wrong. But if he's sick, then cheering at the gallows, cheering at the electric chair, or the firing squad, or the burning at the stake, or the hanging, drawing, and quartering that we have been doing for centuries, it's a representation of that. This person is getting their just desserts because they're less than a person. They've done horrible things, they're less than a person, they're a monster, and we kill monsters. We kill monsters, don't we? In a just society, we kill monsters. It's an incredibly powerful ending. I hope I've made the point well, rather than rambled around it. It's a phenomenal movie. And next up, we've done all of the movies that have got 3 votes. So we move on to the movies with 2 votes. I'm going to do them through alphabetically, which makes the next movie another vampire movie, a completely different vampire movie, 30 Days of Nights. Thank you for joining me now. Thank you for joining me in the future. And I have no sign-off. I need a sign-off.